The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The broadcast is starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Westminster City Council study session of February the 1st, 2021. We have a reasonable agenda tonight. First up on our agenda will be our council reports, followed by the city manager's report. We have two presentations. First will be the city's response to COVID and our next steps. Following that, we'll have a federal land access program update on the Greenway Regional Project. And after that, we have an executive session to deal with the leftover from last week. At this point, I'll turn to the council members and see if anyone has any updates from any items that they have from last week. Councilor Scully.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a few things. It was the Rocky Flat Stewardship Council meeting, and it was a good meeting. We did an election of officers. We talked about the new tractor. We had a report on surface water, groundwater, and site operations, as well as the ecological report. The next meeting was supposed to be in April, but because the new contractor will just be starting at that time, they have moved that meeting to May 3rd. That meeting will be on climate impact. And so it'll be a very interesting meeting. I highly recommend the public and anybody of this council who wants to tune into the public audio. They'll have it live so that you can listen to it. On the surface water, they did have a finding this time. They found some arsenic near the landfill. Just so that they're clear, the way this works is they find it, acknowledge it, they watch it, they come back and retest it next month to see where it's at. Typically, it will go down, and then they will go back to a quarterly investigation of it. But they do believe that it's up because of the drought conditions. So arsenic is actually a common component in our land here in Colorado, so it wasn't a huge surprise. And then just one last thing on that, they made an interesting comment that I thought was worth repeating. There was some question at the Rocky Flats area would continue to be funded by the federal government in the future for observation and monitoring. There was some question because there are talks of reducing some of the budgets, and the executive director of the said that he felt fairly confident that it would be something that would be a continual monitoring and paid for by the federal government, but that he said that, you know, he couldn't make any guarantees because it depends a lot on where they are that surround and the county and what we do as an entity and how we are stewards of that land. And he said that one of the things that might help in the future is that we've opened that land up for and people can walk across it. And he said that's actually a good thing because people will, we had 40,000 people that walked across Rocky Flats this summer. And he said people will, they will look for problems, they will report that back, and that will keep that active. It will keep that monitoring active by the federal government. So I thought it was an interesting comment. I appreciated it. He said that if we didn't do that, we quite literally would probably put up a metal fence around it with barbed wiring, and we wouldn't do anything with it. We wouldn't watch it, we wouldn't monitor it, and it would give it the ability to just grow out of control, so to speak. And so he said that it was a good thing that we opened up. So it was just one man's opinion, but I thought it was worth repeating, and I appreciate it. And then real quick, I just wanted to thank our city staff for 10 sessions, or I'm sorry, 5 sessions, 2 hours each. We have had these water rate, water study sessions, and they have put tremendous work into this. They have investigated, looked at, they have reviewed, they have shown us every report imaginable. Their work has been tremendous, and I just really want to reach out to the staff and say thank you for all your hard work. You have given us a great thing to think about. I really believe you have to know the facts before you make decisions. The impact of the decision you are making. You have to understand what's going to happen, not only for our residents today, but for our residents in the future. So I thank our city staff for all of the information you have given us. A great deal to think about, to learn, to understand, and now it comes to us. So thank you for all your hard work. That's all I have for tonight, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Voles.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have just one thing to report on. I attended the Environmental Advisory Board meeting last week. They met for the first time this year to elected officers. This year, Ellen Buckley will once again be chair of the. Chris Stimson will be vice chair, and Nathan Christensen will be secretary. We also talked about priorities for the year, or for this, I should say. And those 2 main priorities include low-income energy efficiency outreach, and also reaching out to HOAs with resources for sustainability, particularly water conservation. So those are a couple of things they're going to key in on and pull together. I think those are really important issues. So I'm glad to hear that, and we had a really good meeting. That's what I have to report. Thank you, and everybody have a good evening.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On Friday of this week, I had the North Area Transit Alliance meeting, rather on Thursday, and just wanted to go over some of the highlights of that meeting. We went through our meeting of the year. We went through and approved the 2021 budget. We also approved new strategic planning committee meeting members. So Erie and Commerce City are going to join the SPC. I'm as the treasurer, I'm on it. Julie Mullica as past president and Jessica Sandgren are also on it. We went through both smart commutes highlights and accomplishments, and also NADA's 2020 accomplishments. The RTD directors were there, and we heard a little bit from them. In addition, the general manager was there and kind of chatted a little bit about the upcoming study session where they're going to discuss the future of the B line. And so I wanted to make sure everyone on our council was aware that this is a study session that's going to be happening February 9th at 5:30. So they're going to be talking about Northwest Rail, the B line. I will email all of you the link. Obviously, this is important to our residents. I know there's been a lot of talk about it lately and some concern that maybe there's not the same level of momentum on this. So I thought it might be important to share with you. Finally, there was also a presentation on the Colorado greenhouse gas reduction roadmap. There were two individuals from the governor's office from CDOT that gave a presentation on the roadmap. It was very impressive. If any of you have specific questions, I'd be happy to answer those. And then finally, I do believe we're going to have a virtual retreat for 2021 because so much has changed at all sorts of levels to understand where we're at with transportation. How do we reach our goals? 2020 was kind of an interesting year. So kind of get us all in alignment. So we're going in the same direction. And as soon as we have a date for that retreat, I'll let you know. Also, on a more personal level, I wanted to report back that I had the honor and privilege of attending Captain David Sagel's memorial service with Councilor DeMont, the mayor, and with City Manager Tripp, in addition to Finance Director Tammy Hitchens. To say it was a moving event would be an understatement. Very well done. Captain Sagel's character and servant leadership came through very clearly to everyone in attendance, and obviously to anyone who knew. It really left me struck with the types of people who choose to give back to our community and how fortunate we are to have them. So I left with of appreciation for Captain Sagel, his family, for the bond he had with our department. Our chief spoke, and it was very beautiful. One of the comments made was he wasn't a good person because he was a firefighter. He was a firefighter because he was a good person, and that really struck me. So I just wanted to say thank you to his family, and to say he will be missed, and he is definitely honored and appreciated.
Councilor DeMont.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, for bringing up Captain Sagel. I just would great. It was an amazing service. I think it really goes to show the level of people that we have in the city of Westminster, and really the family that our fire department is. It was a very event, and I thank everybody who put it together. And I would ask that you keep our people as well as that family in your prayers, because it is certainly still a time of loss for them. But it was an honor to be able to be there and honor Captain Sagel.
Other questions or comments from council? Just in follow-up, I'd like to thank Governor Polis for the honor he bestowed upon Captain Sagel on Friday, having the state flags all lowered to half-mast. But I sent word also to the Sagel family through Chief Hall that Congressman Perlmutter will be making a floor presentation on behalf of Captain Sagel to have his name entered into the congressional record at the first opportunity he's on the floor. So they've been advised of the honors that are coming to him, not only from the state, but to the national level. Move on to the next item. I have some COVID updates, but I'll wait till that point. Next item up is the city manager report. Mr. Tripp.
Well, Mayor Pro Tem, and Council, I first of all have to say thank you for all of your comments this evening. I appreciate them. Councilor Scully, I'm proud to work with professional and highly trained and very ethical people in our utility. And so we owe them all the credit and thanks that's supported from all the various teams in the city. Comments made about Captain Sagel, I very much appreciate. He was a member of our city family, a beloved man who contributed a great deal in our city
beyond his service as a firefighter, which ultimately cost him his life, he contributed to our community in so many ways. As a Dave was just a really good guy that was unbelievably skilled. There was a long waiting list in the for people who had home remodels on Dave's time off that he would do, and but he contributed in so many other ways, and I'm sure you've read about. I want to reiterate the fact that the city staff is just is so rich with people, character, and extraordinary people. It's just such an honor. Just a couple of items tonight that I'd like to share. First off, I wanted to remind you that Assistant City Manager Cody Erb has asked you to come forward if you'd like to be the City Council representative on the Adams County Regional Economic Partnership. She'd asked that you provide her name if any of you would like to do that. I'm not exactly how she's going to break ties, probably come back next week to get feedback and a decision from all of you. But at this point, she's still taking until February 3rd. So I'd ask that you do that. And then finally, I'll sign off here. I'd like to bring Jody Andrews on, who has a couple of comments to make about some of the great work that's happening within his area as one of our deputy city managers. Again, thank you so very much, Council, for all your comments this evening. I appreciate them all.
All right, thank you, Mr. Tripp. This is Jody Andrews, Deputy City Manager. I have a brief update for you tonight in a couple of key areas, things that we haven't provided updates for you on, and we thought that this would be a benefit to our listening public as well, and our residents and our businesses to get the latest information on primarily two key areas tonight: sustainability and our sustainability programs that we've been working on with our community, and also I wanted to provide you with an update on downtown Westminster. Tremendous year this year for downtown. Some details on that, and show you some of the latest progress there. And then I'll close with some very brief updates from two of our departments that have continued to work very hard through COVID to provide support to our internal community, but also to our resident and business community. So Matt, if I could have the next slide, maybe the next one. Starting with sustainability plan and program. Most people will be aware that our first ever sustainability plan is now in its final draft form. We've worked our way through our stakeholder groups and our input from those key stakeholders. We've now made it available to the public for review and comment, and we are receiving a lot of great feedback on that plan. The review and comment period is still open, so this is an open invitation for if you've not commented to please do so. Your input is really valuable. I'll give one example from a Westminster resident that we received recently. I've been a resident of Westminster for 10 years, and I'm impressed and inspired by the thoughts and ideas proposed in the Westminster Sustainability Plan. I appreciate the effort that is creating this plan and commend the people who have contributed to this project. And of course, the residents referring to are all of our stakeholders that have provided input, including significant involvement and leadership from our city council. So thank you all for helping us get to this point. And it's now with our public to give us their feedback. Matt, if I could have the next slide. I'm going to move into a couple of program highlights. It's been a huge success for Westminster. The Home Energy Squad visits that we partnered with Excel Energy on, and we've had 480 residents of this program between the city and Excel. And it was a free offer to conserve energy, save money on home energy bills, and make home. And that was a very, very well subscribed program that we got a lot of positive response for, and we've helped almost 500 residents in our city reduce their energy use. And a shout out to our partner Excel, who's great to work with on conservation in our community. Matt, if I could have the next slide. This is one of our own programs that we've launched recently, and it's called SAGE, which stands for Save, Act, Grow, and Earn. It's our own sustainable business program. And it's a partnership with our local businesses to help them become more sustainable in whatever that means for them. And it's a very popular program early out of the gate. It's not been in place for long. I want to share with a quote from one of our earlier participants, the Premier Members Credit Union. It has been a goal of Premier Members Credit Union since as a local business focused on our and Sage offer us the resources to implement sustainable action and a sense of community. Sage and other green business programs offer a collaborative success for all businesses. Sage certified organizations going forward. For any of our businesses interested in participating in our Sage program, please check out our city. There's great information on the site, and we'll help you get involved if you're interested in participating. Next slide, please. This is a great update. You've probably seen a lot of in the city in the last year or two with respect to electric vehicles. We added 4 more public charging stations this year, and that brings our total in the city of Westminster up to 22 electric vehicle charging stations. We've also recently completed an electric vehicle action plan for our own fleet, and shown here is a picture of our very first electric vehicle, 100% electric vehicle has now joined the fleet. A renewal program where we will be introducing more electric vehicles as our older come up for replacement. Next slide, please, Matt. This is another one that I think our residents have always been very interested in. Westminster has emerged as a regional leader in this area, and this is community solar gardens subscriptions. We now get 100% of our electricity, which is 4.2 megawatts for 4 of our main public facilities. That's City Hall, the Public Safety Center, City Park Recreation Center, and in 8 months alone, that has saved the city $14,000 in electricity costs. So we subscribe to solar gardens. The solar energy is moved into the Excel grid, and it then provides the energy to these 4 facilities. And we are looking at more subscriptions for city facilities in 2021. And again, the primary objective of this program, or the primary benefit, is we've been reducing our electricity costs to help us reduce our budgets. If I could have the next slide, Matt. This is a new initiative, also in the solar area. We've now launched a co-op for our residents, Solar United Neighbors, and we have resident businesses in the city of Westminster have installed solar panel businesses that now total 10.8 gigawatts of installed power capacity, and that's the equivalent of over 100 residences and businesses now having solar power in the city. Building on that momentum, we entered into this partnership with Solar United Neighbors, and we now offer a much more convenient way for residents and businesses to access solar panels, doing it as part of a group purchase or a group installation. So we also have great information on this program on our city website. So please, if you do not have solar powered panels on your home or business and you are interested in that, please check out our website and participate in our co-op program. Matt. Now I'd like to provide an update on downtown Westminster. I think most of us have seen all of the action on that site for a couple of years now. I would say that in broad terms, this is our busiest year. Last year, 2020, and moving into 2021, we've seen the most construction, we've seen the most new development come successfully to conclusion and begin construction to date, heading into probably our busiest construction year ever. We have 873 apartment units occupied or just about to be occupied, and that's totaling, that total comes from 4 completed buildings in downtown. And that number, 167 affordable, and we're a very good mix for people who are interested in living downtown. Again, check out our website. Interested in becoming a new resident in Westminster. Currently 500 people now living in downtown Westminster, which is quite remarkable. we project to just under 1,000 by the end of this year. And by the end of next year, 2022, we anticipate probably about 1,500 new residents in our downtown. That's brought to us in partnership with our development partners, and they have invested over $450 million to bring those buildings to fruition in our downtown. So nearly $500 million of private investment is resulting in, Matt, if I I'm just going to quickly through some images because most of us get to see down from the sidewalk or road level. Here's some shots from a little higher up. This is looking north from West 88th, and you can see this amount of construction and open buildings looking from the southern boundary of downtown Westminster, which is 88th Avenue. Matt, the next slide, please. This is right in the south central part of the downtown. We're looking towards the Aspire building and the Central Square. And if you look really closely, you can see on the Aspire apartment units, which are the higher floors. And then at the ground floor, just beyond the grassed areas, you'll see, in the plaza area, you'll see our new marketplace starting to take shape. And that's the super coming out there. And that's very exciting. We'll have more information for you on that shortly. But that will be an internal, more urban feeling market hall. Next slide, please. This is one of the newer bits of construction, and that's Westminster Row on Westminster Boulevard. And you can see that Grand Peaks is doing very well as it progresses with the construction of components of the building, and expected to be at the end of this year, bringing residences to downtown. Next slide, please, Matt. I also want to highlight that almost all of the buildings in downtown are being delivered by our development partners to the LEED Silver certification standards, which is very exciting. That's Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design program. When the first phase of the downtown is built out, you'll see the most in Westminster here in downtown. They're not the only ones, but clumped together. The main benefits of the LEED program, of course, are for the residents of the buildings, whether those are businesses or residences, better air quality and reduced energy usage. So we're excited as our future and current new residents. Slide, please, Matt. This, I'm almost finished. I did want to give you an insight into the retail and how that is leasing up in the downtown ground level spaces. Already open, of course, is the Hope Pediatric Dentist. Sweet Bloom Coffee Roasters is under construction and will be opening soon. Tattered Cover, of course, getting ready to open. Their building permit is almost to issue, and of the new Origin Hotel. Westminster Tap and Burger, so that's in process. The Origin Hotel itself will, of course, open this year, and included in that, in addition to Tattered Cover, will be the family brasserie that will be located on the ground floor as part of the hotel. And that's a very exciting combination, those three elements. Reopening, we are working very hard with Alamo to reopen the Alamo Draft House Cinema, and we hope to do that in late spring, early summer. And of course, Alamo is also hopeful that Hollywood will start releasing some new blockbuster movies for them to run, and it's a little bit of a relationship between the two to determine the best time for Alamo to reopen. But they will be reopening, and they do have plans to do that. They're just staying closely linked with Hollywood in terms of the best time to do that. Next slide, please, Matt. I think I won't read these quotes, but our development, at least our development partners do enjoy working in the city of Westminster. It applies not just to downtown, but also to private driven developments in the city. I would just highlight this quote from the Grand Peaks people that I showed you that earlier image that's under construction on Westminster. I know it's not easy right now with everything going on at work. We've encountered a lot of barriers lately with other municipalities. So thank you for being a great partner and great example. And we do work very closely with our development community to make sure that that they work with us in a seamless fashion as possible. Please. I only have a few more slides to next one. We titled them Open for Business, and I just wanted to emphasize for everybody what goes on behind the scenes to make all of this happen. Technology department, of course, our public, our council has been very flexible in moving the evolving pandemic. Our very first virtual city council meeting was held on March 23rd, 2020. And in total, we've had 20 city council meetings. We've also had 7 special city council meetings and 19 study sessions, including workshops and other city council, including as well 8 special city council study sessions. We've also implemented some time ago COVID-19 employee screening app and the supporting to go along with that. We deployed a significant amount of virtual work environments, laptops primarily, into homes and mobile workstations to allow the business to continue to work through the pandemic. And of course, we've been really focusing a lot also on security audits and trainings because as you probably are following in the news, there's a lot of vulnerabilities and exposures with such a force. So a shout out here internally to our IT group. They don't get a lot of credit on the outside of our organization, but we all really appreciate the great work they do. I think I have one more slide, Matt, if you could show us that one. Yeah, community development. These are the folks who continue to provide billing of our enforcement services, regulatory services. And one of the things that we've prided ourselves on is our virtual inspections. Here's a quote from a company that does a lot of work in Westminster, Colorado, Custom Basements. We're very thankful for the cities and counties that have made the decision to continue inspections virtually rather than stop them altogether. We were very grateful that you personally took the time to make sure we were taken care of to complete our inspections. We look forward to working with you all more in the future. Goes along with that is a resident on a different project. This is probably a home renovation or home improvement. Thank you for the time you've spent with us, along with holding the contractor accountable for what it doesn't meet the codes and standards. And also, we have one shout out to our code enforcement people. You can imagine they've been quite busy during the pandemic. A lot more people working at home. A lot more people observing before or doing things they may not have done before. And our code enforcement people have been working very closely with our community. We don't see a lot of complaints rise beyond our code enforcement people, which tell that our people that are working with the residents, our employees, are doing a really good job helping people work through the changes. If I could have that final slide, Matt, that would be great. With this city council, of course, huge leadership in terms of moving the city towards a new sign code. And that, of course, was at the very end of 2020 adopted. So the city of Westminster now has a new sign code. It's gotten great reviews across the board. We had great participation from our stakeholder groups. Our Chamber of Commerce was involved. We had some significant leadership from our city council and certain in particular city councilors. So I just wanted to close on this note that this was all done during COVID. Tremendous support and flexible buy-in and involvement and input from our community stakeholders. So that's a thank you to who continue to work with us on this, and we are happy to roll it out and bring it back this year. And that wraps up my update for tonight. So thank you all very much.
Mr. Tripp, you have anything else?
Sir, thank you, Jody, very much, and thank your staff together.
All right, with that being said, let's move on to the Mr. Kirschbaum and team.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Matt, if you could pull up slides. So this is the familiar slide. Once again, for the most part, very encouraging news. The arrows most of the arrows are pointing in the right direction. A couple of them up and down a little bit as the days go by, depending on typically on the volume of testing that's taking place. You see that Adams and Jefferson County remain overall in the orange status as a county. And as I compare these numbers, which were as of last Friday, January 29th, with a data check just before this meeting started, the numbers stayed pretty steady over the weekend, very similar to what you see in this chart, with one notable difference that I'll point out, and that is with hospitalization. The number on Friday was a 702. That number as of this evening, which reflects today's data, is now down to 611. So that is a very substantial jump just in the few days since Friday. The only other thing to add today, go to the next slide, Matt. You'll see the curve on that hospitalization continues that downward trend in an encouraging direction downward. The only other thing I was going to mention this evening is, as you know, the governor's office and state agencies are working on an update to the COVID dial and the metrics that go with it. Accepting feedback through today on a proposal. I think we expect to see that sometime by midweek there will be an approved change to the dial and the metrics that go with that. And if that is the case, we'll adjust this reporting for next Monday to reflect the changes, and we'll probably add some additional explain what changed. So kind of restart a new baseline if necessary. That's all for you this evening, unless you have any questions.
I don't think there's any questions. I'll just kind of follow up with Max. As Max alluded to, we had a meeting at the state level on Friday where the state introduced the proposed new dial metrics. They gave us until 5 o'clock today to submit any or changes. Tentatively, that rollout is for Thursday, but that of comments they had by 5 o'clock today. For the most part, there is not. They had 3 items that they said that drove the consideration of what they're calling COVID to go, and that was to provide the ability to better disease economic hardships due to increasing vaccinations and decreasing disease rates, making the dial framework more responsive to local conditions, and adding for the benefits to hospitality from the vaccine of people over the age of 70 and frontline healthcare workers in adjusting the metrics. For us, it doesn't really have any on our 5-star programs, either in Adams or Jefferson County. If you look at the proposed dial, what you would find in the metrics of what qualifies as either orange, yellow, blue, green, red, that's where the changes are primarily at. They're expanding the infection numbers. Just to give you an example, red used to be anything over 300. In the proposed change, it'll be anything over 500. In orange, that used to be 175 to 300. Metric will be 300 to 500. So they've broadened the spectrum of what they're proposing, but don't misunderstand that. That doesn't necessarily mean we're going to jump to the proposed review period, 15 days to 7. There's a couple more in there, and this has to do on the positivity rates of testing. In the orange place, it used to be 15%. They're going to lower that to 10. And on the, they're going to lower that to no more than 7.5. So these are all things that are in consideration. Keep in mind, nothing has been approved because the comments only closed about 2 hours ago. So we'll see over the next few days what's going on. We're still seeing a lot of activity at our site, which is next to Fat Cats and also Water World. We will have, as Max indicated, as soon as we know for sure what's been approved, probably it may not be until Friday. So I expect Max will have much more updates for us on what was the final version that's coming out next Monday. Other than that, the big thing is that there's vaccines coming out, and I just got a message, and I want to try to make sure I read it correctly to give to you. Vaccine site for Jefferson County. It opens on February the 3rd. And this is in Jefferson County. Jefferson County Public Health will be opening its vaccination clinic to adults 70 and over beginning February 3rd. And that is going to be the Arvada Fire Protection District site. And I'm trying to find an address if I can for you. And I don't see the exact address of it, but this at the headquarters in Arvada. I would say go to the Jefferson County Public Health Department. If you are 70 over, you have not been able to get the vaccine schedule. That is a new test site, opens up on Wednesday. And a lot of what we're seeing is still going forward from more test sites trying to be open. We have not received any updates from the 3 sites that are being proposed. We know one is open in Adams County at the Government Center. We've not had any notice from the county that they've got the other 2 at Gaylord or the Human Services Center open yet, but we're still anticipating it could be open yet this week. That's the only additional pieces I had on COVID for now. Mr. Andrews, I think you have something else. Frankel.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, for having me back. This is a very brief update for Mayor Pro Tem and City Council and our public. I'd like to just provide a very brief couple of comments on special events in Westminster in 2021. And we get a lot of questions about these, and now that we're well into the year already, we thought it would be a very good idea to provide some early thoughts on what's going to happen this year in Westminster. So along with our national and local peers, including our surrounding communities and the Metro North Arts Alliance, Westminster is reevaluating and redesigning its events this year in the context of the pandemic and the related public health constraints. Due to the extensive planning necessary to produce large-scale in-person events, the city will not be able to resume its pre-COVID event calendar in the foreseeable future, likely not until 2022. However, our highly creative cultural affairs team has adapted plans for 2021 to continue opportunities for community events, socialization, and celebrations while maintaining compliance with the typical public health protocols. So the theme for 2021 will be shifting our focus from one-time events to longer-term attractions that can accommodate smaller events over extended periods of time. Some examples of things that staff is working on. From May to October, we're looking at mobile art in the neighborhood workshops. In June, a live immersive theater event in partnership with the Catamounts. That's the same group that produced The Last Apple Tree in 2019 and Rough in 2020 at Legacy Ridge. In July, we hope to be resuming drive-in movies in downtown Westminster. In August, bringing back Friday night beer crawl, a small social distance friends moving through a dozen or so breweries as a pandemic version of our popular craft beer event. Those are just some of the things that staff is working on. I'd also like to comment into the summer on July 4th, is evaluating the best way to celebrate this important day in 2020. Like 2020, this will look different from past celebrations because it's not advisable to encourage large gatherings, and because of the lead time necessary to plan for such an event, we're reviewing best practices and consulting with our public safety professionals to prioritize public health on this important day. More details will be forthcoming, but at this time, we'd like to help set expectations that we will be having a different type of event this year, likely more similar to 2020 than previous years. I'd note that all of our special events plans are subject to change depending on evolving protocols, health and safety, and that our staff is striving to do all it can to provide safe events for our community. Please continue to monitor the city website, and we'll keep all upcoming and current events current and up to date on the website. And that's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Frankel?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council members. As tonight's the first meeting of February, I wanted to provide you with an emergency declaration update to let you know where things stand relative to the March 2020 emergency declaration that was ratified by City Council. Excuse me. As council is aware, we did code amendments that provide for ongoing opportunity to do remote meetings, as tonight's is an example of having another remote meeting. We've also modified the code for ongoing opportunities to allow for restaurants to have expanded premises and outdoor dining, planning, and liquor license applications expedited. So that remains an ongoing process for our planning and liquor licensing activities. We also had a contract ratified by City Council to provide for COVID testing for safety sensitive employees. That is on. And we also have an emergency order that was ratified by City Council, which is ongoing, capping third-party delivery fees for restaurants. And that order is in place until the end of March. Also, to let council know, as another ongoing effort, we are tracking eligible expenditures for FEMA reimbursement. So that is what I have for you this evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Frankel. All right, council, we've got about an hour in. Our next item could be a lengthy report. I'll give you a short break, 5 minutes. Let's call it 7:15. We'll come back at 7:20. So we're going to take a short 5-minute recess.
Is there any chance we could finish up one thing on this, or did we already lose somebody?
One thing on what, Mr. DeMont?
On the COVID situation, I had put my name in right at the end of Mr. Frankel's.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see it. I thought that was from before. Go ahead, ask your question and we'll go.
And this is a question really for the council. So I would just ask you to think about if we could put, understanding it's an arbitrary date, but just to continue to ask for a date. Maybe if we could put like March 1st or the second Monday in March, and at least make that a goal, and we could judge it with staff to see if that's something feasible. Would that be something you guys would be open to at least setting an arbitrary date to go back to City Hall?
I thought we discussed that the other night based on Councilor Seymour. We said we were going to watch for a 2-week steady. And then if that 2-week got us down into those, we would meet again and set a date. If I missed that, please correct me.
I don't specifically remember. I remember watch it. I would defer to Councilor Seymour.
Yeah, because we didn't want to wait till the end of March to the roundtable. We were going to try to watch it for 2 weeks to see if we continued to go down and could stabilize and then set a date. Councilor Seymour?
I think what I'm shooting for was us agreeing on a dial hit, or and now that's moving too, is that when we got to a certain point on the dial that would then trigger us. I'm sorry, I'm losing my color spectrum here. I believe orange is our next level down, Mr. Mayor.
We're in orange now. We're hoping to go to yellow.
Okay, so I suggested that we could use a agreed upon number and say, okay, when in this case Adams County hits orange, then that would trigger us 2 weeks from that Monday to be a date to return. That's what I was just brought up last week is let's set a very agreed upon third party number, and then when it hits that would give staff to then say, okay, we've got 2 weeks.
which to some extent makes sense. I think the other thing that I'm curious if setting a date would make easier, as long as we watch that and that looks good, is more along the things that City Manager Tripp brought up when we were having the discussion. As I thought about it over the last week, he brought up the fact that it take him and his staff time in order to accommodate to make sure everything's in place for us to return. So my thought is, if we set a date that we could shoot for, understanding that we need to watch the dial, that potentially that gives him some more opportunity to prepare for a potential return.
Mr. Tripp, do you have any comments?
Thank you. Thanks for an opportunity to comment on what is clearly your decision. I'll throw some kind of random thoughts out here and have you think about them. One is that a conversation about the impact of a moving towards a post-COVID council meeting, as Councilor Seymour mentioned that he'd like to talk about it on the 29th, that impact I think ought to be discussed, because you might come back hybrid. The managers I talk to in other jurisdictions say that their councils are considering sort of a hybrid. So there's a policy aspect there. That's number one. Number two, some direction based on the dial and vaccines. That seems to be another one that other jurisdictions are using and seems to be advisable. Number three, and this is brand new information, and please don't press me to go into a lot of details here, because I don't know that it's necessary, but our staff has actually been working on a couple of significant mechanical improvements to some buildings, including City Hall, that we expect to have completed, I'm just told this morning, probably at the end of March. They improve air handling and they improve air treatment. And so it's just something else you got to think about. Moreover, what's suggested is having kind of a fruitful conversation of all those sort of subjects would be helpful to you. And as I've mentioned before, we'd like as much time as possible. I really, without pulling Barbara in at this point, Deputy Opie, I think she was hoping for 2 to 4 weeks. But those are just some things you probably ought to consider. And I really do encourage just a full discussion by all 7 of you, and we'll listen and answer questions. But those are some things I want you to be aware of that may be helpful as you think about it.
All right, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thanks. I had been in the queue to talk about this. I was going to say I appreciated Councilor Seymour's comments the previous week that to me a date feels far too arbitrary, but monitoring kind of where we're at in the dial, having time to make sure that that's steady state seems appropriate. And I like City Manager Tripp's comments just now about also incorporating vaccination rates. I had not considered that. But what I'm hearing from my colleagues is that they don't want to wait till March 29th to at least have the policy discussion. I think that that's what I'm hearing. And I want to honor City Manager Tripp's need to have enough runway if once we make a decision to be able to prepare the physical building, the staffing, and all of the logistics around it. So I'm wondering if we want to have, you know, in the next few study sessions, perhaps a conversation with what some of those best practices from other communities are, like what they're considering, and so that we're making a real data-driven decision versus an arbitrary date. What I'm concerned with the date, even if we monitor what the data is looking like, that's going to confuse our community and be frustrating. People thinking that we're starting on a date and then we move the goalposts. I'd rather have metrics, how long they need to be there, and then how long after that is it that would be open. So that's my food for thought.
Councilor Smith.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you. I don't see this as any different than the date that we put forward in the fall. We had a date coming back in October. I think it was October 19th. and we were monitoring where we were at to that point. And so we were ready to come back in October 19th. So I don't quite understand the difference between then and now. And we're sending kiddos back to school. We're getting back out there, and I'm not quite understanding where, and maybe the conversation starts with do we want a hybrid meeting? Do we want that mixed, policy discussion as far as in person, some out, virtual? So, I mean, while I can appreciate and understand where people are vaccination rates and getting City Hall back into business, I really don't see it as different as our date we had planned in the fall.
The only thing I'll remind you, if there is a discussion to review this at the next study session, you're in the last study this month right now. We won't have another one until March. Or you could look at it at the last meeting of this. We can do it as a post-meeting item, so as not to interrupt the business, because we only have 2 more meetings this month, and both of those are council meetings. So if the group wants to put this on, say, the second meeting as a post-meeting item for having a discussion that gives staff some time to prepare, get ready to give us the information they have, and that way we can be watching the COVID numbers for the next 2 weeks and see how the vaccinations are going as well. Keeping in mind, most of our vaccines and stuff right now are going to our first responders and those 70 and above. Teachers will be in group 1B, but that is going to be driven by the availability of vaccines being there. As the governor talked about today, we're not getting anywhere near the vaccines that we need to meet the criteria. So based on that and the request from Councilors DeMott and Seymour and Smith, are you comfortable with saying at the last meeting of this month, we will set aside time as a post-meeting item, giving staff time to review where they're at and what date they may come back?
So I welcome the discussion at that point.
Okay. From what I see a majority of the council were good with as a meeting item on the last meeting for February. Mr. Tripp, if you and staff would start to prepare your conversations around that, and we'll put it on the agenda for the last meeting of the month.
Thank you. The staff confirmed with me, you froze up during the time you were discussing setting that meeting. Are you talking about doing a post meeting at the city council meeting of February 22? Is that what you're talking about?
Yes.
Okay, got it. Yeah, we'll certainly be ready to do that.
Okay, thank you. All right, is there anything else on the COVID updates? Everybody got all their comments?
That's it, sir. Thank you.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and give you that 5-minute break. It's now 7:25. You get till 7:30. Please be back on time. All right, council's 7:30. Ms. Parker, are we back on the record?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Next item up is the Rocky Mountain Greenway Regional Project. Mr. Tripp, who have you got to present this one?
Mr. Mayor, I believe we've got Jason Gink or his staff who've been working on this. There'll probably be other parties to this conversation. So Jason, if you would, go ahead and kick this off. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tripp. It's a pleasure to be with you this evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, and City Council. Staff has a relatively brief presentation. Open Space Superintendent Joe Reale will be leading the staff portion of the presentation. And immediately following that, we'll have a few additional slides, which one of our partners and experts will speak to. We also have a host of other individuals that are here for questions and answers that are available as soon as we're done with the presentation. And Joe Reale will introduce them as he transitions into that section. So I'll just make a few brief comments. If Matt, if you don't mind. Okay, you're there. Great, thank you. Pulling up the presentation, just a few brief comments. The city has placed, historically, it's placed a tremendous value on planning and developing regional trails. There are approximately 150 miles of trails in Westminster. We had over 1 million trail users in 2020. And in fact, some of our trail segments were up as much as 400% usage compared to previous years. Excuse me. FLAP, the Federal Lands Access Program, which we're going to be describing this evening, is for that specific grant and program. You're going to hear a little bit more about the construction of a pedestrian overpass crossing in Indiana Street and a pedestrian underpass at Highway 128, connecting the Westminster Hills open space to Rocky Flats. The regional vision of the trail system is to connect Denver International Airport to the Rocky Mountains. And this crossing will serve as a natural gateway to the Rocky Mountains from Westminster to provide nature-based mobility and exploration for the community and visitors, which otherwise did not exist today. Couple more. In 2016, the city joined with 5 neighboring open space partners, including Jefferson County, Boulder County, City and County of Broomfield, the City of Boulder, and the City of Arvada to submit a grant to extend the Rocky Mountain Greenway Regional Project. As part of that submittal and a part of the project, City Council requested a sampling analysis plan that was requested in part to support the Federal Lands Access Program grant. So tonight, we're coming back to you. And Joe Reale, if you don't mind joining me on camera, sir, I'm going to hand it over. Tonight, we're going to walk you through that information, and we're coming back to you with the commitment staff made previously to follow up on the sampling plan and results. Joe Reale, sir, if you don't mind, thank you.
Hey, folks, we need to get caught up on the slides. We've got the slide deck up, but we've got the, we don't have it in presentation mode, which we need to get it flipped to that. And then, Joe, I want to make sure that it's the right place in your presentation.
We're good right here, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilor, thank you very much for your time tonight. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you, and I'm really excited about this program. First, I really want to acknowledge the partners that are here with us tonight that have also been working hard to support this program. Hillary Merritt, the Deputy Director of the Jefferson County Open Space, is on the call this evening. David Lucas is joining us by phone. I understand he's out wrangling a buffalo right now, but he will be available for questions as well. And I really want to acknowledge Andrew Valdez with Jefferson County Planner. He's really been the shepherd of this program for many years now. And then finally, Jason Andrews will be following up my presentation because with Engineering Analytics, they are the consultant that did all of the analysis work for the program. If I could have the first slide, please. So really, this is a program long envisioned. It's one of the original 16 in 16 that was put forth by then Governor Hickenlooper. It is one of the last remaining trails to be done. It has also been acknowledged as one of 3 Colorado the Beautiful trail segments, and it's a large statewide trail priority. It's been designated by former President Obama as an official America's Great Outdoors project, with really an ambitious goal to connect from Rocky Mountain Arsenal National Wildlife Refuge all the way up to Rocky Mountain National Park. So if I could have the next slide, please. So where we are today. Today, the Rocky Mountain Greenway Trail currently is connected from the Arsenal all the way through Stanley Lake to the terminus right now in the Westy Hills open space, in the newly acquired Woman Creek property. Some of those trail connections just opened in the past year. So really this next piece, the flat grant, makes a big leap for us. It gets into the Rocky Flats area and then across Highway 128 into Boulder, and we're well on our way up to Rocky Mountain National Park. So this has been a long process. It started in 2016 with Jefferson County taking the lead, applying for this Federal Lands Access Program grant, which is a very generous grant. The federal government is fronting over 80% of the cost of what are 2 significant road crossings. The city's commitment, the city of Westminster's commitment, if we continue to be a partner here, is $220,000. And those funds were appropriated in 2016 when we signed the initial IGA, contingent on the findings we'll discuss later. So they are available and waiting in a CIP today. If I could have the next slide, please. So as I said, an intergovernmental agreement with Jefferson County and the other partners Jason mentioned earlier, Boulder City, Boulder County, and Arvada. And that support, that IGA, was contingent on some very specific actions. The first action was for us to have a public process in which we created a sampling analysis plan, otherwise known in your documents as a SAP. That was done. It was done through a series of public meetings that were held here in Westminster as well as in our partners' counties. And there is a summary of that public engagement on my next slide. So as a result of that SAP program, engineering analytics was contracted to actually conduct that sampling. And so just to be clear, there's 2 steps here. We had a process by which we defined how we were going to sample. Then they went out, we solicited a contractor to actually do the sampling and analysis. So that's been going on now for the last 4 years. There's 2 sampling efforts that took place. One at the crossing at Indiana, the second at the crossing over on 128. And our representative from Engineering Analytics, Jason, will give you more details on the specifics there. The bottom line is the samples were without exception lower than the historic values for the relevant exposure units, and they were within the limits that were set for the opening of Rocky Flats to the public. The Jefferson County Commissioners have unanimously approved moving forward with the grant application and entering new IGAs with partners just this past fall. If I could have the next slide, please. So this is just a quick summary of the public process that has taken place to date. I'd like to just point out the website at the bottom of that slide there. Jefferson County has done a really good job of documenting all of the steps taken, all of the presentation materials from these public presentations, and the feedback are documented there and they're available for you to review. But fundamentally, the project has received good support from the community. And the SAP meetings that we held were well attended. If I could have the next slide, please. So where are we today? So at this moment, all of our partner agencies are going through the same process that we are tonight. They're having study sessions with their various boards with the intent of going forward with approval. It is the intent of the partners to have all the approvals, to have gone through all of our discussions by the end of this first quarter, so that come this summer we can have the project designed by the Federal Highway and then go out for construction starting this fall. And I really hope to be out riding my bike across the Westminster open space by sometime next year. With that, if I could have the last slide. So I'm going to turn it over now to Jason Andrews with Engineering Analytics. He's going to go through all the findings with you and how the sampling took place. I'd be glad to come back and answer any questions, as will our representatives from Jefferson County. So with that, Jason, if I could get you to come up on screen. Thanks, Jason.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you, members of the council. Excited to be able to speak to you tonight about this project that we worked on. It's a great little project here. If I can get the next slide. So we sampled in 2 locations, as Joe indicated. This slide, the locations where we sampled are a little small. If you look at the upper left there on that slide, you'll see a little blue box right under it. It says CO 128 or County Road, CO 128, right? Colorado Highway. That's one area where there's a proposed underpass location. And then down at the bottom left, you'll see Indiana Street location text there. And you'll see kind of a little triangle to the east of Indiana Street and a rectangle to the west of Indiana Street. So those were 2 sampling locations. Total 25 samples were collected or at sample locations. Can I get the next slide, please? So this is a zoom in of those 2 locations. The top left figure is the Indiana Street crossing. The top right figure, bottom left figure is the Colorado Highway 128 crossing locations. A couple things I want to point out on this before we move forward. There's some little dots on there you can see. They're green little identifiers. Those are the sample identifiers. So if you're looking through our sampling results report, those 2 will correlate. We also marked on there in yellow the areas of the high locations. That'll come into play as we move into the next slide. I also want to highlight on this, as we look at the Indiana Street crossing, that sample density there is about 1 sample for every 0.42 acres. The sampling that was done prior to our work was 1 sample for every 2.33 acres. So we're significantly denser in our sample collection. And then also on the CO 128 sampling area, that sampling is about 1 sample for every half acre. The sampling that was done prior in this area for those exposure units, if you're familiar with the area, was about 1 sample for every 14 acres. So we have really, really tight sampling. So I kind of wanted to lead that with you. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide and let's look at the results of this sampling. So you can see here, there's a lot to digest on this slide. So down on the column, the left-hand column, we have the sample areas. So we have CO 128, we have Indiana Street. And as we work our way across the table, left to right, we have the exposure unit, the associated exposure unit. So that's what we did to compare with historic data that was collected prior to our work. We selected the exposure unit at the site to compare that with. We continue to work to the right. We compared our samples to existing background. So, and then those numbers that are below there, the 0.45 for County Road or Colorado Highway 128 and the Indiana Street crossing, the 19.4, those are the maximum samples results that we found. So I'm going to keep working my way to the right and we can kind of come back to some of these. Probably the most important thing to do for the sake of brevity is jump all the way to the second to the last column. It says historic maximum results and the cleanup standards. So you can see that our high results are significantly less than the historic maximum results and less than the cleanup standard established for cleanup of the refuge. Let's go ahead and jump to the next slide. We did another round of sampling. The city and county of Broomfield requested that we do some sampling at depth, specifically at the Indiana Street crossing for proposed foundation work. So we went out there and we drilled 2 20-foot holes one on the east side of Indiana Street, one on the west side of Indiana Street, to see what was occurring out there. With depth, we have concentrations, confirming the assumption or the understanding that any potential contamination would be confirmed those results were provided to the city and county of Broomfield. On this, there's full disclosure as to what has been going on at the site. Next slide, please. Then also wanted to bring you up to speed on what the work we've done for the Fish and Wildlife Service on this is a map representing the systems on the refuge. And you can see there's some purple trails. There's some purple lines with little green deviation on it. Those are the sample locations that we collected along the proposed trail alignments out there at the site. We sampled at 48 locations and it crosses 6 exposure units. And the exposure units are outlined in the orange kind of tannish colored lines. Those are our exposure units. And if you remember, that's what I was referring to. That's what we compare with historic data. So at the left side of the screen, that's Indiana Street. Along the north is CO 128 for the site. So once again, just want to bring you up to speed on other sampling efforts that have been done out there. You can go to the next slide, please. So this is a result of the trail sampling that we did for the Fish and Wildlife Service. This is laid out very similar to the sampling effort that was conducted for the FLAP group, which Westminster is a part of. So going down, those are the associated exposure units that those trail systems ran through. As you can see, if we compare our peak samples, which is about the middle column of this, where it says project sample maximum less than the RFS mean, and then we have some numbers under those check marks. Those numbers are our maximum concentrations, maximum results that we sampled or that we saw for our results. You can see they're less than the historic maximum results and they're less than the cleanup standard. Thus, this will bring us to our conclusion slide that we came to. If you can go to the next slide, please. And I'll just read this one. We didn't, I won't read it verbatim, but we didn't obtain any results collected and analyzed that indicated a higher risk than presented in the 2006 Kaiser Hill report or the DOE report, which allows public access for the project area. So I know there's a lot of data real quick to digest in there. I wanted to try to move through that and present that in a concise manner if possible to allow obviously questions and discussion as needed. Next slide. And that concludes my presentation.
Jason, do you want questions now or you want to finish the presentation first?
Mr. Mayor, I apologize. Assuming you're talking to Jason Gank, Director of Parks, Recreation, and Library. Yeah, just to Jason. So, but what I was going to do is just kind of wrap up the presentation portion, and certainly we'll keep the presentation active on the screen should council want to go back to any particular slide, and we'd be happy to go into that in detail. We do have other representatives available this evening to try and handle any type of question you might have. But at this point, staff presentation, and we are prepared for questions. I will just leave you with, you know, the testing on the site, kind of in the last half of the presentation, is very important. I mean, one, we certainly committed to do so. But and on the other hand, you know, the Westminster Hills open space is one of our most popular locations in our entire system. You know, I think as Joe noted earlier, over 1 million visits to that site alone last year, as well as the U.S. Fish and Wildlife site, which was noted earlier, I think by Councilor Scully. I apologize if I had that wrong, on the success of the trail system on that end too. So, you know, the importance of this project is the significance and the regional vision of connecting Denver National Airport to the Rocky Mountains, and plays a critical role in that regard. So thank you for your patience and listening to our presentation, and we're prepared to answer questions you may have.
All right, let me go first to Councilor Scully and Councilor DeMott. You are the city representative on the Stewardship Council. Have you had any presentations similar to this that would offer any different views on where the sampling is right now?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and the alternate to the Rocky Flats Council, Councilor Seymour.
Okay.
And we haven't had anything that has been contrary to what you are seeing tonight. In fact, we've had similar presentations from the Rocky Flats Stewardship Council. So I don't see anything different here.
All right, Councilor Seymour, any comments from you?
Yeah, and concur with Councilor Scully on that. There was an incident of one single sampling that was then resampled. Then even more sampling was done on top of that. So that and that's the process out there. As far as any type of soil, water, any hit that they get, then there's an increase in that. And so there's not been a significant relapse of that. So no other comments.
Pro Tim, you had a question.
Thank you. For those that are joining us tonight and listening, this was a very long agenda item. It was over 600 pages. And so a few questions that I am pretty certain were answered in the report. I'm just going to ask Mr. Andrews and Mr. Gank to please forgive and bear with me. This may be what Councilor Seymour was referencing just a moment ago, but I did notice, and I believe in the 2006 testing, there had been a contaminant of concern I can't remember the acronym, it was HHR, I believe, in the wind-blown area. And so I was going to ask, comparatively with this 2019 testing for the same general area and for the same contaminant, if I could get the specifics of where it's at now. Is it below just historic levels, or is it below kind of that contaminated concern level? And I'm not sure if that was a clear question.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I appreciate that. I'm going to ask Jason Andrews to join me again. If you wouldn't mind taking that one.
Yeah. I assume you're referring to the sample that Councilmember Seymour brought up that was the higher sample. Is that the sample you're referring to?
Okay, it is on page 9 of your report. As described in the HHRA, COCs were identified for surface soil, surface sediment in the wind-blown area, EU. Plutonium-239/240 was the only radionuclide identified as a COC. However, COCs were not identified for surface soil sediment in the Rock Creek drainage. So can you address that for me, clear it up for me? Sure. Obviously, in 2016, I was on council, very supportive of the project, but there was a lot of concern in our community about the implications of doing this, and just want to make sure verifying this is safe for our folks.
Yeah, definitely. So page 9, PDF, page 9, right? Document page 4.
No, it says 9 on your report, the March 28th, 2019 report. In our packet, it is
Which
page
report was that? That was the March
26
report?
of 659.
That was the March report you said?
This is the sampling and analysis plan, Rocky Mountain Greenway Trail Crossings, Rocky Mountain Greenway Partner Group. And on the bottom, it says March 28th, 2019, engineering analytics. So it was your plan prior to sampling.
Correct. Okay, I was looking at my sample results report, so I apologize for the confusion.
No, I believe this is from the 2006 testing. And so what I'm wondering is, my read of this, and I may be misunderstanding it, my read of this was 2006, there was a COC, and I just wanted to see from the same general area with your sampling. It sounds like we're, but I also want to make sure we're below that contaminative concern level. Is that more clear?
Yes, that's more clear, and I apologize. I was looking at a different report and that, so that was my confusion. Yes, we're below the COC level. You know, I guess to further define contaminants of concern, right? There's a contaminant of concern which doesn't necessarily indicate a level, right? So a contaminant of concern can be any concentration. It means that when they were reviewing this, they said, you know, plutonium is a potential contaminant of concern, and the cleanup levels were established at 50 picocuries per gram for cleanup. So yes, we are below the levels that were established in that 2006 Kaiser Hill report associated therewith. Did I answer your question?
So that's more confusing for me, because what you've just said is that any contaminated of concern at any level, right, would be listed, and it doesn't necessarily mean that it's on like the cleanup threshold or it's a problem. So just trying to understand why that one was pulled out and highlighted from that report as being the only one present. So what you're telling me though is that doesn't mean it necessarily hit a threshold level.
Yeah, so we're kind of getting into kind of I guess semantics as far as how we word these, right? So a contaminant of concern is that somebody goes out and says, we identified plutonium as a contaminant of concern, right? So it says, I'm concerned about plutonium, you know, me, Jason Andrews, I'm concerned about plutonium. Let's go look at it and let's establish a threshold to which that contaminant of concern poses an unacceptable risk to human health, right? So we pulled it up and says, all right, at the bottom of page 9, it says, in the HHRA, so the Human Health Risk Assessment, identified surface and soil samples blown in the windblown area, and the plutonium was the only radionuclide identified as a contaminant of concern. So basically, they went and said, the only thing we're concerned about here is plutonium, 239, 240. The other ones were not necessarily identified in that area. So they identified as potential contaminant of concern. You are correct. And as we go through that, so sorry, I haven't looked at the SAP in a long time because the SAP was pre-sampling. So yeah, this is a few years ago. So I'm trying to work through this with you here. I apologize.
No, it's fine. And I should have emailed the question in to staff as it's very specific, and I have such, you know, I was trying to read through and understand. I guess what I'm saying is in comparison from the findings of 2006, and we don't need to honestly, I think I'm in the weeds with my question. The goal of my question is to just make sure that I'm absolutely clear that both lower than the historic highs and lower than the where the allowable or public uses, where we would have to trigger the cleanup, I think in that chart that you showed before. So both metrics in every single one of these sites, it was lower than, is that correct?
That is correct. Yes,
Okay.
Yes. Yes.
That is all I was actually trying to clarify. So my apologies for getting in the weeds there.
No, I apologize for not reviewing that SAP earlier. So yeah, you are correct. They're below both the historic threshold and the cleanup thresholds.
Councilor Volz.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I had a similar question or kind of a line of questioning that Mayor Pro Tem Seitz just touched on. So I'm good with that. I won't waste people's time on that. I do have a question though about, I'm not sure, this probably maybe is for Mr. Gank a little bit. It looked like Broomfield, City County Broomfield were in, but they pulled out last fall. Is that correct?
That's correct. Broomfield did pull out of the agreement this past year. That's accurate. Yes, sir.
What do you happen to know why? This project is somewhat new to me, and I'm not as aware as I should be, but what are the reasons, or did they give reasons why they pulled out?
The reasons that they provided were primarily that as far as the location and the network connecting to Broomfield and it not moving away. In other words, there is no connection now listed so far in Broomfield. They didn't necessarily see the fit into their trail system and indicating this as a top priority. At one time, there were even more locations to be explored under the years of study. and it was in fact a location that was in Broomfield, just to our property, Westminster Hills Open Space, and that was no longer the case. So they did decide to pull out of the agreement. And best as we can tell in talking with the other partners, all other partners remain committed. As Joe Reale mentioned earlier, they're queued up on their schedules to do the same types of presentations we're doing this evening.
So then my follow-up question would, this doesn't change or did it change our funding share, meaning we had more, one less partner, did it increase our share in the project or will it?
Yes.
Because it was approved back in 2016.
Thank you, Councilor. And Joe Reale, if you don't mind joining me to help explain the budget and the breakdown from the project, that would be helpful as far as what the increase overall was Broomfield pulling out.
Yeah, there is an increase from Broomfield pulling out of the project. I can look at those. I can pull those numbers up specifically, but the bottom line is it's still the Westminster contribution to the program will be less than what our not to exceed was in the 2016 agenda. But I can pull out the specifics to get back to you.
No, you don't need to do that for me. I just was curious if, yeah, so no surprises, and that's good. Thank you very much, and thanks for your presentation. This is one of my first chances to see this, and it sounds like an outstanding, it's a really amazing program. So, and a nice trail system. I look forward to seeing it completed. So thank you.
Councilor Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Gink, this is probably a question for you and just more of a clarification. In the summary from staff, it says that an additional IGA will be negotiated in the future to address the ongoing maintenance, operation, and ownership of the trail crossing. But in the resolution for 2016 that was in our packet, it mentioned that any ongoing maintenance requirements for the improvements supported through the FLAP grant was part of that IGA. So can you walk me through why we would need another IGA if it's addressed in a 2016 resolution?
Sure. Thank you, Councilor Smith. Absolutely. And so, yes, the intent in working with the partners is that we want to be very clear about how the partners are planning for capital costs, repair, and maintenance. And we don't believe that the original agreement was as clear. And so we fully intend on bringing that back to council once we have that prepared to make sure we do consider long-term costs and how we're gonna pay for ongoing repair and maintenance.
And so then would we have that understanding before would we have the full cost before we would approve anything moving forward with this of what's come to us tonight? So we would
Joe
have that full
Reale,
picture.
Yeah, thank you, Councilor Smith. Joe Reale, do you mind joining me here, please? And could you give me the status? I want to be very specific in our answer. What is the status in working through that agreement so far with our partners, as far as specifically the ongoing maintenance costs, the long-term costs, sir?
So the IGA agreement that we will be signing, that I believe is the draft of which is in your packet, it calls for all the partner agencies to negotiate in good faith on the future of that. And so that will be a future negotiation. And I have every confidence that we'll be able to work with our partners to come up with an acceptable agreement on the long-term maintenance program.
Okay. And why would we do that at a later date and not as an entirety of what we're looking at here?
At the moment, we've always kind of looked at this in three stages. Right? The first stage was sort of getting the agreement and going out there and finding out if it's okay for us to move forward. That's sort of where we are tonight. Each of our partners now have to go back to their communities and make this same presentation and ask that same question of their communities. And so it was sort of trying to make a phased approach. Bringing it all at once didn't necessarily fit our needs.
Okay. Well, I would say, I mean, I like what we're But my only concern is that I feel like there's a missing piece of the puzzle here. Because what I don't want to have happen is for us to move this forward and then find out that there's an astronomical cost to maintain and own, if that's how it ends up being, where Westminster gets full ownership and maintenance of this. Not that I don't want it shared or full ownership, but it just seems like it needs to have a bigger, more fuller picture of what I'm actually looking forward and committing to for moving this forward.
Keep in mind, council, this is not an approval of this. This is just an update.
Understood, but I'm looking at the full picture, Mr. Mayor.
Let me finish. What I'm telling you is nothing can be decided till they bring back the IGA for us to approve. So we have no commitment at this point because we don't have all the information. So that'll be in the IGA that comes back. Ms. Barrett, did you have a comment?
Yes, I did have a comment. The IGA that we are talking about right now is about the construction of the undercrossing and the overpass. And what we would anticipate is we may need separate agreements because Westminster may not be part of the agreement for the long-term maintenance of the underpass, which is going into Boulder, and the overpass, which is in the Westminster section. So is we're moving forward with a single IGA for the construction under the flat, and then anticipating that there would be separate agreements, which is why we have not included in this. And so in terms of what we would come back, we would anticipate those would probably be with separate entities, smaller agreements that can be negotiated directly as opposed to a 5-way agreement for places we may not have areas that you guys would be in charge of kind of monitoring.
Got it. Thank you so much for that clarification.
All right, staff, do you have anything else you want to present at this time? Mr. Gink, does that
Yes, staff is complete with our presentation, and certainly if there are other, any additional questions, we'd be happy to entertain them. Our goal is to bring this back in the near future, as was mentioned earlier in the presentation, for council consideration to continue to move forward with the project. Thank you.
So the goal for council is just to give us a thumbs up or a thumbs down to allow them to move forward with the preparation of the IGA, which then come back for a formal consideration at a future date. I'll poll the council just to get an idea if everybody is okay. And I got thumbs up from everybody except, never mind. We have a 7-0 to bring it back, Mr. Gink, so go ahead.
Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
All right, thank you. Mr. Frankel, you're still with us?
I am.
All right. A request for a continuation of planned executive session from last week, but due to the hour of the night, we were unable to finish. And we will also be asking for a short bio break in between these two meetings. If you would please, Mr. Frankel, lead us back into this one, please.
Yes, sir. Mayor and councilors, the executive session that's proposed for you this evening is to discuss a personnel matter, the city manager's performance evaluation pursuant to Westminster Municipal Code Section 111.3 C1 and Colorado Revised Statute 246402-4F.
As defined by the city attorney, we've had a request to enter into an executive session. As a reminder, this was what's scheduled for last week. At this point, I will poll each member of the council to confirm that they are prepared to go into executive session. For the record, Councilor Scully.
Yes, sir.
Councilor Seymour.
Yes.
Councilor Smith.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Sites.
Yes.
Councilor Volz.
Yes.
Councilor DeMott.
Yep.
And the mayor as well. We will reconvene at 8:20. 8:20. That gives you about 10 minutes. And then we will come back. Remember, you are going into the executive session link that has already been provided, so you will need to log out. For those in the public who are with us tonight, this concludes the City Council study session for tonight. We thank you for joining, and we look forward to seeing you at 7 p.m. next week. And everyone have a good night.